Hi, it's Maria from Still Dreaming Homestead. Happy to be back with you as always. Today we're going to continue reading in our book On the Banks of Plum Creek by Laura Ingalls Wilder. And today's chapter, chapter 6, is called Wreath of Roses. And this is the picture they're showing. Obviously not a wreath, but I think that might be some bugs on a rock. We'll find out. Out on the prairie beyond the stable, there was a long gray rock. It rose up above the waving grasses and nodding wild flowers. On top of it was flat, almost smooth, so wide that Laura and Mary could run on it side by side, and so long they could race each other. It was a wonderful place to play. Gray-green lichens with ruffled edges grew flat on it. Wandering ants crossed it. Often a butterfly stopped to rest there. Then Laura watched the velvety rings slowly opening and closing, as if the butterfly breathed with them. She saw the tiny feet on the rock and the feelers, that's the little antenna, quivering, and even the round, lidless eyes. Wow, she was looking really close. She never tried to catch a butterfly. She knew that its wings were covered with feathers too tiny to see. A touch would brush off those tiny feathers and hurt the butterfly. I'm not sure that it's really covered in feathers, but it is very good idea not to touch them. The sun was always warm on the big gray rock. Sunshine was always on the waving prairie grasses and birds and butterflies in the sunshine. Breezes always blew there, warm and perfumed with the sun-warmed grasses. Far away, toward the place where the sky came down to the land, dark things moved on the prairie. They were cattle grazing. Laura and Mary never went to play on the green rock in the morning, and they did not stay there when the sun was going down, because morning and evening the cattle went by. They went by in a herd, with trampling hooves and tossing horns. Johnny Johnson, the herd boy, walked behind them. He had a round red face and round blue eyes and pale whitey yellow hair. He grinned, but did not say anything. He couldn't. He did not know any words that Laura and Mary knew, so he spoke a different language. Late one afternoon, Pa called them from the creek. He was going to the big rock to see Johnny Johnson bring the cattle home, and Laura and Mary could go with him. Laura skipped with joy. She had never been so close to a herd of cattle, and she would not be afraid when Pa was there. Mary came slowly, staying close to Pa. The cattle were already quite near. Their bawling growing louder, their horns tossed above the herd, and the thin golden dust rose up around them because they were stomping on that ground. "Here they come," Pa said. "Scramble up." He boosted Mary and Laura onto the big rock. Then they looked at the cattle. Red backs and brown backs, black and white and spotted backs surged by, pushed by. Eyes rolled and tongues flicked flat noses so they could lick all the way to their nose. Heads tipped wickedly to gorge with their fierce horns. But Laura and Mary were safe on the high gray rock, and Pa stood against it watching. The last of the herd was going by when both Laura and Mary caught sight of the prettiest cow they had ever seen. She was a little white cow. She had red ears and in the middle of her forehead was a red spot. Her small white horns curved inward, pointing towards that red spot. And on her white side, right in the middle, was a perfect circle of red spots as big as roses. Even Mary jumped up and down. Oh, look, she shouted. Pa, see the cow with the wreath of roses? A wreath is usually in the shape of a circle, and it's something that people use as a decoration, like to hang on their wall or on their door. Pa laughed. He was helping Johnny Johnson drive that cow from the others. He called back, "Come along, girls. Help me drive her into the stable." Laura jumped off the rock and ran to help him, shouting, "Why, Pa, why?" "Oh, Pa, are we going to keep her?" The little white cow went into the stable, and Pa answered, "She's our cow." Laura turned and ran as fast as she could. She pounded down the path and rushed into the dugout, yelling, "Oh, Ma, come see the cow. We've got a cow. Oh, Ma, the prettiest cow ever." Ma took Carrie on her arm and came to see. "Charles," she said. "She's ours, Carolyn," said Pa. "How do you like her?" But Charles," Ma said. "I got her from Nelson," Pa told her. "I'm paying him by a day's work. Nelson's got to have help haying and harvesting. Look at her. She's a good little milch cow. Carolyn, we're going to have milk and butter." "Oh, Charles," said Ma. Laura did not wait to hear any more. She turned around and ran again as fast as she could along the path and down into the dugout. She grabbed her tin cup from the supper table and rushed back again. Pa tied the pretty white cow in her own little stall besides Pete and Bright. She stood quietly chewing her cud. Laura squatted down beside her, and holding the tin cup carefully in one hand, she took hold of that cow with the other hand and squeezed, just as she had seen Pa do when he milked. And sure enough, a streak of warm white milk went straight into the tin cup. "My goodness, what is that child doing?" Ma exclaimed. "I'm milking, Ma," said Laura. "Not on that side," Ma told her quickly. "She'll kick you." But the gentle cow only turned her head and looked at Laura with gentle eyes. She looked surprised, but she did not kick. I'll kind of show you the picture of what it probably looked like. Can you see that? Always milk a cow from the right side. From the right side, Laura, said Ma. But Pa said, "Look at that little half pint. Who taught you to milk?" Nobody had taught Laura. She knew how to milk a cow. She had watched Pa do it. Now they all watched her. Streak after streak of milk zinged into the tin cup. Then streak after streak purred and foamed till the white foam rose up almost to the cup's brim, the very top. Then Pa and Ma and Mary and Laura each took a big swallow of that warm, delicious milk, and what was left, Carrie drank up. They felt good inside, and they all stood looking at that beautiful cow. "What's her name?" Ma asked. Pa's big laugh ran out, and he said, "Her name is Reet." "Reet?" Ma repeated. "What outlandish name is that?" "The Nelsons called her some Norwegian name," said Pa. "When I asked what it meant, Mrs. Nelson said it was Reet." "What on earth is Reet?" Ma asked him. "That's what I asked Mrs. Nelson," Pa said. "She kept on saying Reet, and I guess I looked as foolish as I felt, for finally she said, 'A wreath of roses.'" A wreath! Laura shouted, a wreath of roses. Then they all laughed till they could not laugh any more, and Pa said, it does beat all. We live in Wisconsin among Swedes and Germans. In Indian Territory, we lived among the Indians. Now in Minnesota, all of our neighbors are Norwegians. They're good neighbors too, but I guess our kind of folk is pretty scarce. Well, said Ma, we're not going to call this cow Reet, nor are we going to call her Wreath of Roses. Her name is Spot. And that's already the end of the chapter. It was so short. But it's very late at night, so I think that's where I'm going to stop. I'll be back again tomorrow reading. I hope you enjoyed this one. What would have you named this cow? And can you believe Laura milked it all by herself? She had learned to by watching her pa. What have you watched? Maybe your mom or dad? Maybe a neighbor? What if you watched them do that you learned how to do just by watching? Let me think what I have learned. Well, one thing I learned from my dad and my mom was how to tell a story. And I think that's a good thing. And something that my sons learned from me is how to plant a garden. All right. If you are an adult, or even if you're a child, you can also teach people how to do things by your example. So always do the best work you can. You never know who's watching. All right, it's Maria from Still Dreaming Homestead. I want to pray blessings on you and on yours, in your house and out of your house, in the day and the night. And whatever you do, keep dreaming. Good night.